earn more money but too busy to start a side hustle? Do it the right way and teach your money to make more money for yourself, even when you're asleep. Dale Corpus will show you just how here on the School of Cash Flow. With his entrepreneurial mindset and extensive experience in real estate and finance, Dale will help you become a responsible, strategic, and passionate passive real estate investor. Learn how you can increase your earnings or find more ways to make money, only here on the School of Cash Flow.
Hello, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the School of Cash Flow. So I'm the host, Dale Corpus. So when I was growing up, I didn't excel too well at team sports. I mean, that wasn't my thing. I did a solo sport. I was a swimmer. So while I didn't necessarily have to work with a team to swim a race, I was going to practices, getting myself individually stronger. And at swim meets, I was competing against myself to set new personal records for myself. I was good at certain swimming events like breaststroke and individual medley. And, those are the events that I stuck to, but whereas my other swimming friends were good at other ones that they stuck to because they did them well. So I had to achieve my own individual goals. And if I worked hard, I was able to achieve even more. And it felt really good when I was able to, reach a goal and hit a new PR. When I first got into real estate sales, I had that same, it's all about me, that I got to do everything mentality. And I really thought that I had to, be good at everything in the sales process to be successful, from like lead generation and marketing and sales and all the paperwork behind the scenes. But it's tiring. And I realized it really wasn't the case. And I was stunting my own growth if I continued to operate that way. And I realized I could expand and grow more once I outsourced and formed a team of people that were really good at what they could do, so they could take on some of the tasks and do it even better than what I was able to do. And I could happily pay them for it as well, because it would take me to another level. So I started teaming up with an assistant, a transaction coordinator, like a photographer and video editor. And again, people that were really good at what they did. And it really did work for me, and it helped me scale up more so. So as it relates to real estate investing, same thing. I had a similar thing going on. I felt like I had to know everything about everything before investing. And then I realized that committing to investing was actually more important than knowing everything from A to Z on how to invest. Because once you commit to anything, everything will fall into place. So focusing on the who and not the how is more important. That you'll seek people that are already doing what you want to do, and you can learn and partner with them. And, this is a perfect, segue for me to talk about my guest today. His name is Chad Urbshott from EquiGrowth Capital. He's part of my own investing team when it comes to some of my mortgage notes, and I'm really excited to have him on. I've done a joint venture with him, which we could talk a little bit, a bit more. And he's very knowledgeable in the mortgage note space, and is an excellent operator and a great teammate for that matter. And so a little bit more about Chad. He's the president of EquiGrowth Capital, an alternative real estate investment firm that he initially formed in 2013 that now provides advisory services to its subsidiary holdings and partnerships, which acquires residential mortgage loans from financial institutions, hedge funds, and mortgage originators throughout the U.S. And he holds a BS degree in engineering science from Western University, graduating with honors and distinction. So without further ado, thanks, Chad, for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, great. Thanks, Dale. Thanks for having me on. I was quite honored when you reached out the other day to see if I'd join your new podcast. So it's pretty exciting to be one of your first handful of guests to be on. So hopefully it'll be bigger and better as the time goes on for you. So.
Well, yeah, it's like one of those things. I don't even know what I was getting into, but like now, pretty soon I'll be a seasoned podcaster. So learn as you go.
Right.
Yeah, you don't need to know everything. Just commit to it.
Right.
So for my folks that don't know about you yet, I mean, I gave my own intro to you. Is there anything else that I missed or that you wanted to add about yourself, your background?
Sure, yeah. So I started in real estate investing back in about 2000, I think it was 2007-ish.
Okay.
Um, how I started back then was I was walking through an airport back in my corporate days, running to an airplane or waiting for an airplane, and I saw this book, and everybody mentions it now, especially with bigger pockets, called Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Yep.
and it was all about real estate investing. So I picked up a copy and I started reading it. I guess it was on the plane, and then one thing led to another. Is took a deep dive into it. And the one thing it said in the book was, there's opportunities everywhere. You just got to know where to look for them. And now that you've been introduced to the topic, things are just going to start popping out at you.
Yep.
And I'm not joking. Like within like a couple of days after that, I see at this little tiny ad in the paper that said, "How to invest in real estate without swinging a hammer." Something a little bit catchy like that. Call the number, and I thought it was a bit of a scam, but you leave your message, you leave your address and your phone number. I'm like, this is back before the internet. Or, I mean, the internet was around,
Right.
but it was before social media. I'm like, oh, this is a little strange leaving my address. But in any event, I received this package in the mail a few days later, and said, come to one of our classes, and we'll teach you how to invest in real estate and how to do rent to owns. And so I go to the class, and the first thing the guy at one of the instructors I wouldn't call him an instructor. There's only like 5 or 6 of us there. But anyways, he holds up the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding. This is like a sign from above or whatever. And so yeah, they were touting out how to do rent owns versus straight rentals. And that was how I kind of started. So I bought my first rent home. Then I bought another one right next door. And then people on the street realized what I was doing. So I ended up buying. It was actually townhouses. It was like a block of townhouses that I bought, and so that was my foray into real estate investing. So,
Oh wow.
and then my background was structural engineering. So I used to work for a bunch of developers. So I've got a background in working with like industrial and commercial construction. So I ended up doing a couple of my own with I guess some other partners, I guess you could say at the time. Jumped into student apartment investing. I bought 2 10-unit buildings right next door to each other. It was at the university I went to. And I thought at the time, I went to the school. My parents actually still lived pretty close there and had a family around. That this shouldn't be too hard to manage. Well, after about 3 months, realizing that okay, these people are probably not even as bad as I was when I was in school taking care of the property. I learned pretty quick that you need to get a property manager, and that was my introduction to property management at the time. So I got a property manager, took a lot of my headaches away, and so that was like 2012ish, I guess it was around that time.
Okay.
I went down to this conference that it was a real estate conference that I've been going to for a couple of years, and there was people there that were touting about buying U.S. rental properties. Oh, and I should have backed up to mention that I'm Canadian, eh?
Okay.
So, so this is a conference in Toronto. So, on the ride down with one of my colleagues, he was talking about investing in Atlanta, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can hardly manage my properties from like 2 hours away. How do you think you can manage your properties from a 2-hour flight away?
Yeah.
And so that was when I went to these couple seminars that were put on by these U.S. Rental. Well, they're like turnkey operators. I don't know what the term turnkey was at that time.
Okay.
So I watched these seminars, and I just couldn't. I was blown away by the rent to purchase ratio. I was just like absolutely blown away. So, at the time, buying these properties for about $300,000, and they're renting for about $1,500. So, 0.5% rule.
Yep.
And they're like, you could buy these properties for $50,000, all fixed up, with a tenant in place for $900. I'm like, holy cap, that's like almost 4 times the rent to price ratio. So at that time, I was kind of hooked on investing, or starting to research in the U.S. And then so I thought, well, I'm going to start investing where I knew. I've been going down to Florida for a bunch of years with my in-laws, and because they had a place down there. So I just started researching the Florida market, and that was back, like I said, 2012-ish, 13. And I just started buying foreclosures. So my very first purchase was, well, actually, it was probably my third purchase, I guess, was a foreclosure. So I had no idea what I was doing.
Yep.
I didn't know what I was even going to do with this property. I just like knew that you could get a foreclosure at a screaming good deal,
Yep.
And as long as you buy it cheap enough, then you can kind of do anything with that you wanted with it, whether you wanted to fix it up and rent it out, or just sell it as is, or do a rehab on it and sell it. Yeah, so that's how it started. And then a couple years after that is when I discovered the note business, and so I've been doing that kind of ever since about 2015 onwards.
Loved how you just jumped in. Yeah, you just jumped right in, and it just everything evolved.
Yeah. So I just kind of jumped in with both feet, and I was a little bit tepid at first. Like back in 2007, it took me about 6 months probably to buy my first property. But once you buy your first one, after that, it's I wouldn't say it is easier, but the fear kind of goes away. It starts diminishing after some time. And it's funny how you're talking about earlier at the beginning about just committing to something and doing it.
Right.
I've recently been doing some, I wouldn't call it soul searching, but trying to establish some future goals. And like my goal setting in the last few years, like I want to reach X amount, and I'm like, I did really well in a deal recently, and it was like a 10 timeser, and immediately thought of Grant Cardone's book, 10X. Like I got to read that book again. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Grant Cardone, but I'm like, it kind of puts you in that mindset. And so I listened to it. I don't read books anymore because everything's on an audio book. But I listened again last week, and that was exactly what he said. He said, just commit to something. Like don't get into the paralysis analysis mode. Just set your mind something, just do it. Kind of figure it out as you go. So that's perfect segue, as like you said, when you started out, is just jump in and just and you learn as you go.
Just like this podcast I'm doing, you just learn as you go. One of the things that I'm learning something about you. So when you first started, with your very first investment, were you also working a W-2 job, or did you okay, got it. How did that progression work? Because like I take you don't have that job anymore. Like how did that progression go from being like a W-2 employee to being like a full-time investor?
So it was pretty tough at the time, because I was traveling, man. I was gone like usually 1 week out of the month at least. At the time when I was they call it a T4 in Canada, but it was I was traveling mostly around the US actually. So I was in business development for a construction company. And so yeah, it was a lot of work when I first started, because I had no idea what I was doing. So whenever I was home, I'd be working on the properties, trying to kind of fix them up and get renters into them. So I did that for a number of years, tried to add to the portfolio. And then it was around, I can't remember what year it was, 2013, I believe it was. I got to the point where, I'd actually sold off a few of my properties, and I was like, I made as much on these as I do in my, my W-2 job. And the plan was to move to Florida actually at that time. And I thought, well, no better way to jump in with both feet than just learning, the market in Florida. I can move down there. And so it got, I'll be honest, it's still a tough road, man. It's like, you don't have that steady paycheck coming in, and to rely on, and trying to get a mortgage at a bank is pretty much practically non-existent. For the first few years, especially, I have no income to show. But yeah, it was just like I said, I just kind of jumped in with both feet and did it, and learned as I went. And there's no looking back now. I don't think I could ever go back to a regular corporate job anymore. So
yeah, I mean, and when I'm just out of curiosity, like if you were to start off, just getting into real estate investing again, do you think you would do it the same way? Just kind of doing what you did, or like knowing what you know now, would you have started a different way maybe?
No. So at the time I was just buying rental properties for, cash flow and appreciation, right? And the cash flow wasn't really that great after holding these for a few years. The people that were, the guys at the front of the room that were touting the rent to own program, they kind of left out things like, maintenance costs, vacancies, turnovers, when, you got to replace all the windows because the seals go in them after 5 years, which happened to me one properties, like literally 5 years old, 5-year-old property, and the windows all went, had to replace them all, things like that. they never really discussed those kind of things. So yeah, they weren't all that profitable. However, so you're in the San Fran area.
Yeah.
So not all of Canada, but much of Canada is like, well, I'm in the Toronto area, and much of the area is very similar price-wise as San Fran. And the appreciation here has just been, well, like the last year and a half, just like since the pandemic began, it's just been crazy. But we've been on a bull market run in the real estate market since 1990. So it's been about a 30-year bull market run. So if you buy anything in the last 30 years and held on to it for any time, it's just gone up like that. Very similar to where you guys are in the Bay Area. So that's kind of the game plan when I bought it. It wasn't more so to retire. It was more like for longer term, like kind of like retirement. But if I was to not have a job, I would definitely not hold on to like buy a couple of rental properties, because you're not going to be able to live off that. I'd be jumping into doing flips, or I've never really done wholesaling. I've wholesaled a few deals, but I would do wholesaling, something that you can generate quick income. But the main thing, before I even knew about notes, that was unknown to me until like 2015 that you could even buy a note. But now that I know what I know now, I would just jump right into the note business. And it's probably the most I don't know how you define it, but it's probably the quickest way to generate income, I guess, than like out of pretty much any real estate business I've seen. I mean, besides flipping, I mean, if you're into flipping and you know what you're doing, you can make what, 20, 30, 50 grand off of one deal, and you do a few of those a year, you're doing pretty well, right? But from a cash on cash return respective, it's it's definitely the most lucrative I've seen. So so that's kind of a long answer to your question. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. And then the note space, it's so technical. I mean, you're such a good operator in it. I mean, they don't have any schools to teach you how to like negotiate notes and find them and all that kind of stuff. Like, how did that progress for you? How did you know how to do everything?
So, like I said, back in when I was buying the foreclosures, it was 2013, and that's when all the hedge funds kind of started moving in and buying them hold them as rental properties. And like not long after I started buying them, I saw prices just going up and up and up and up. I'm like, so all the auctions in Florida are all online, and you can see all the results. And so ahead of time, I do my analysis on what I thought the property's worth, what approximately I think this should sell for. And you looking at the results afterwards, I'm like, oh my gosh, someone's paying like stupid prices for they're paying retail prices for an as is. When you take it back to foreclosure, most people probably are aware they're not in the best of shape. They usually need a ton of work because the previous person that was living there obviously wasn't taking care of it. So I remember having lunch with this guy one day, and I was actually doing some work with him in Cleveland, doing some turnkey rentals. But he lived in Florida. I actually met him at the same conference a couple years later in Toronto that I'd been to before. And his office was literally like 5-10 minutes from my place in Florida that I just built. And I was like, oh, what a coincidence. So anyways, I go for lunch with him, and I was complaining about how the foreclosure prices are going up. And he says, well, why don't you start buying the notes? Like, before they get to foreclosure. I'm like, what did you talk about? What do you mean by the notes? He said, well, yeah, you can buy them from the banks before they get to foreclosure. I'm like, what? I've never heard of such a concept, because it was completely foreign to me.
Right.
And fortunately enough, at that time, he was working with another guy who everybody really knows very well in the note business, and he's been around for years and years and years. His name's Bill Bimel. And I got an introductory to Bill and his team. And we were actually buying foreclosures with like Bill's team. And then they had a really good contracting crew, so I was doing the flips with them. But all the while doing that, I was, picking their brains, like how does the note business work, for a few months. And I started doing some more research on it. And lo and behold, one day I was on like a bunch of meetup groups, and you get notifications about different meetups. And I saw this meetup that said, learn how to buy notes from the bank, basically the same thing I was learning how to do. So I ended up going to this meeting, and was at a coffee shop, or like a bread, Panera bread or something like that. And yeah, the guy was standing up, same thing, was years and years before, standing up at the front, touting the ways on how to buy mortgage notes. And so I approached him afterwards, and he was kind of like doing a class, like, it's kind of like his half-hour spiel, and then, you can sign up for
training,
whatever it was, $1,000. Yeah, like he wasn't really a guru. It was just more like, if you want to learn how to do this, I'll charge you this much. And so I just approached him. I said, listen, I've been buying foreclosures for a few years now. I learned, like, I know how to run title. Like, I know all that stuff. Can I just learn through you? And like, like, let's do I didn't even know what the term really meant at the time, joint venture. And it's like,
right?
but I knew what it meant, but I didn't know exactly like how it works. So he just said, yeah, we can do we can do a joint venture. And so long story short, we did about 6 deals, I think, on notes. The very first one we bought was in Texas. It like literally we foreclosed on it within, because Texas is a really fast foreclosure state. Foreclosed on it within like 4 months, and then sold it and made, I can't remember, it was like a 70% return within like whatever, 7, 8 months. And I was like, wow, that is insane. Like this is this business really is like, is all it's cracked up to be. So then, we bought, like, I think it was, I'm pretty sure we did about 6. So we bought 5 more out of the gate. And I actually raised some money from some other investors I was working with at the time to put into it. And so part of my endeavor was to learn the business. And what I learned was what not to do, I guess, because it was just like, he was kind of new at it too. So I think, we were kind of like the guinea pig investors, and not that he was dropping the ball and stuff, but some things are slipping through the cracks, and ended up they all made like an extraordinary amount of money, or like on a return on investment basis. And I'm like, man, if this guy can do this and make this much money, like, there's no way I can't lose, right? So so that was about 2017 at that point, 16, 17. And I'm like, I'm just going to start doing this on my own. So I just went and started buying my own notes with my own company's capital. So I bought about the first 10, 12 just to kind of get familiar with the process. And then after that, then I started kind of bringing investors in. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got hooked into the business.
So you used your own capital first, and then you proved, like, you proved yourself that you could make it all happen, and negotiate the notes and turn a profit and all that stuff. So you're comfortable bringing on other investors. I mean, how, like, where are you finding your notes? I mean, in what areas are you trying to, like, what geographic areas are you buying them in? Or is there certain ones?
If I was to, so geographic, I'll start with that. I would say I was actually looking at, so I've got the software that I use that I just started using about 6 months ago. I used to use another one called Podio. This one's called ClickUp. It's kind of a silly name for this program, but it's more of a project management software, task management software. Within that, you can put all the addresses, and it actually gives you a map. It's kind of cool, so you can see where all your loans are. And I was looking at it the other day. I'm like, man, I've got everything east of the Mississippi, like nothing really west, maybe a couple in Kansas City, I guess. But yeah, so pretty much everything east of the Mississippi, predominantly in the Midwest states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina. Those are probably the top ones. And then Florida. So those are, Louisiana, Mississippi, coming around those. Yeah. So like I said, pretty much everything east of the Mississippi. Michigan's another one, Wisconsin. And I'm guessing probably about 15 to 20 states if I was to add them all up. So so that's the geographic where I'm buying them from. The very first note or two I bought, I got through a broker who I wouldn't say he ripped me off, but it was obviously he had his best interests at heart. Sold me some notes that they were valid notes. He ended up brokering them through a hedge fund who I've learned later on, like a year or two down the road, that they sell them direct to people. Like, you don't need to go through a bloody broker. Their name's Condor. So I'll throw that name out there if anybody's looking for notes. That's Kondaur. Anyway, so I bought these notes through him, and one turned out to be okay, and the other one, I wouldn't call it a disaster, but this guy was he's very knowledgeable in the note business, or he portended to be. And there's actually on both the notes I bought through him, I was just shaking my head some of the things that happened afterwards. I actually joint ventured with him, I guess, on the first one. I said, listen, I don't really like, I know what I'm doing, but like you a little more seasons than I, let's cut let's cut a portion of the profit to you. Like I'll put in the money, like you help me through this and I'll, cut you a check at the end kind of thing. Wrote up an agreement. And it was every single time I turn around, I'm like, okay, how did this get missed? How did this just get missed? Like this guy was, supposed to be an expert. And, like I said, it's, you jump in and you just kind of learn as you go. And, one of the things I learned very early on is you need to really check not only the title, but you need to check they're called unrecorded liens or like municipal liens, code violations, all that, which I knew from buying foreclosures. But he told me he checked all that stuff because I let him to do all the legwork. And the day before closing, I find out there was like a $3,000 lien with the township in this little podunk town in Pennsylvania that we bought this thing in. So yeah, that didn't. I mean, it went well. Made some money on it, but not nearly as much. And then the other one, it was. If I knew what then when I don't now, I definitely wouldn't have paid what I did for it. But it ended up being okay. Like I said, in this note business, you buy things, if you can buy them at a good enough discount, cross all your T's and dot your I's, then you should usually come out okay. So yeah, then from there, I started going to conferences, like note investing conferences, and starting to know some of the players are, and you just kind of learn from networking, like who sells notes and where can you get them, and join some Facebook groups, and just people will drop names the odd time, and you're just like, oh hey, I just learned a new source of notes, and email a person or you call them up and say, hey, listen, I'm looking to buy some notes, and they'll usually sell them to you. So that's kind of how I got started buying. And truth be told, I'm still buying from the same couple sources today, or like some of them. I developed some new ones over the years, but I probably have like a handful or two where I get them from. And the one thing you need to know in this business is it's a very small network. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and you can't burn anybody in this business, because if you do, like if you go into a deal and you don't close on it, you're going to get blacklisted for not only that seller, but the word could get around that, hey, you didn't commit on this purchase. And it's such a small knit community, the word might get out. So that's one thing I definitely recommend to people. Don't on the buy side, don't burn anybody, because
that could dry up your deal source. That could dry up your deal flow.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, not only that seller, but potentially tarnish you down the road. So
between between non-performing notes and performing notes, I take it your main focus is non-performing. I take it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the majority that the majority of pickup are non-performing. I'll pick up some. People call them sub-performing, but if you talk to Chris Saveni, he says no, they're either non-performing or they're performing. There's no in between. But so a sub-performing note, for the listeners may not be familiar, is kind of like a inconsistent payment stream. So they might pay 8 months out of the year, or they'll pay sometimes they'll pay 6 months all at once, and then they'll go 8 months and they'll make one payment, so it's very spotty.
Yeah.
So those are like, usually if you get them at a good enough discount, those are generally pretty profitable. So I'll pick up some of those if if a seller just wants to get rid of them because they just getting sick of the spotty payment stream. Those are usually ones where people pick them up as performing and then they become sub-performing, and those are the really good ones. So matter of fact, that the deals that you and I are in, that's kind of how those were. And then I don't know what happened. I think we just put the pressure on with the servicer, like, hey, let's get these caught up. And they've been pretty much performing ever since. So the odd month or two they'll miss, but they always get caught up. So so we kind of lucked out on the ones that you and I have got together. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so we threw out the word joint venture. I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, since you were the only actually person that I've done joint venture mortgage notes with. I mean, I own some mortgage notes individually. I invested some like mortgage note funds, through syndications. And then with you, I have a joint venture. So it's like, can you help just elaborate a little bit on like what that means and what the difference is?
Yeah, typically how it is laid out, like typically is, one partner puts in the funds and then the other one does all the work, and there's everything in between, depending on how you want to split it up, like on the back end, like profits, what have you. That's usually up to the two partners or the three or four on how they want to structure it. But yeah, generally it's like one partner puts in all the money and the other one does all the legwork, like finding the deals, negotiating them, purchasing them, doing all the due diligence ahead of time, and then doing the asset management throughout the life of it until you sell them again. So that's generally how it works. I've had some different arrangements, like joint ventures, where it's kind of like one of the partners putting in some of the money, not all of it, maybe the majority of it, and then I'm putting in some as well, and they'll do a little bit of the work, I'll do a little bit of the work. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's lots of ways to skin a cat, but that what I mentioned at the beginning is typically how they're done. So and I usually want to invest, if I'm going to do a joint venture with someone, I usually want to invest with someone who's knowledgeable in real estate, someone who's got a real estate background, and knows the note business a little bit, like maybe he's taken a weekend course or attended a few conferences, or even like watch a bunch of YouTube videos just so they're familiar with the concept. Because there's nothing worse than, and I won't take people on that don't have knowledge of it, because I'm not going to hold someone's hand.
You're not here to teach them. Yeah, you're not here to teach them about how
no,
they work. Yeah.
No. So I've had a few at the few years back that wanted to learn the business and get into it. And I was like, I'm not really into teaching people. Like, that's just the way I am. I'm not like, I get people ask me all the time, hey, why don't you like do courses on, how to invest in notes and everything. That's just not me. Like, ever since I was a little kid, trying to help my sister in like math, like I just not a good teacher. It's just like not in me. Yeah. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'll show you the ropes. And either I wasn't a very good teacher, or this person, it happened a couple times where they threw their hands up after like 3 or 6 months, like, yeah, hey, listen, this is way too complicated. I don't think I want to get into this. Just let me know when the deal's done, and
yeah,
I'll do another one with you. I just don't like, I don't think I want to get into this. And I had a couple people that did that. They just said, yeah, this is way too complicated. But like I said, it might have been partial on my behalf, on I'm just not a good teacher, because I understand it my way and I try to teach it my way, and I just have a hard time kind of relaying how to get that message across to people. But yeah, so like I said, I'll invest with people. The very number one thing is they need to have like the real estate background, or at least they've invested in some kind of real estate syndication or whatever that may be before. So yeah.
Since you're investing primarily in a lot of non-performing notes, and I know the goal of non-performing notes is to get them reperforming again, how often though would you say that you need to foreclose on on a non-performing note? Does that often very seldomly, or like just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the tides have turned a little bit over the years, like since I started. Back, when I started, I was picking up a lot of mortgages that were underwater, meaning the mortgage balance was worth more than the property. In those cases, almost all the time, not all the time, but a lot of the times, the borrower would just like kind of throw their hands up to say, listen, I'm so far under, I just want out of this thing. Let's just get this over with. So I'd either get a deed in lieu or foreclosure. But now the tides have turned. Now that a lot of these mortgages, that were originated back in 2005 when the market was like at its peak. Yeah. Well, now that the market is ramped right back up again, a lot of these have equity. So these borrowers are, they're a lot more inclined to stay in their homes. So I would say that the ratio is a little bit less now. Like at the time, I would say it was probably 50% of the time that a borrower would just, either through a deed in lieu or a foreclosure, it'd be about 50% of the time. You take the property back, and then the other 50% of the time, you'd work out some sort of reinstatement or loan mod, or the spotty pairs, the catch up kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. But it's a little bit less now. I'm finding more and more people are really trying to get back in their homes. And then, if all the stimulus that came out in the last year, all like a year ago, when the pandemic first hit, I'm like, oh, here we go. Everybody's gonna stop paying. The world's ending. Come June, I think it was of last year, about a year ago from now, or July, the stimulus checks started coming out, and next thing you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody's like catching up. Like, some of the people that were like months behind, they're like all of a sudden they're totally caught up now. So it's actually, we're in a kind of a much better place than we were, even prior to the pandemic, where it seems that people have more means, I guess. I don't know if it was all from the stimulus checks, but everybody seems to be making payments on time now. Even like I said, the spotty pairs are right back up to where they were. So I've done some loan mods in the last month or two where, these people have been like, semi-performing over the last few years, or, year or two that I've had these loans, and they're all caught up now. So it's like, okay, well, let's do a loan mod and, get this thing, restructured and, starting to been selling some off for the last like 6 months now, just because the market is so, everybody's starving for yield at this point in time, because, interest rates dropped so much that, and anybody's, the yield, meaning like the, basically what the accumulated interest is on that, or what that interest payment on that loan is, that's the yield. So if you take all the interest over 12 months divided by 12, or divided by whatever you paid for it, that's your yield. So, so the prices have gone up for performers and reperformers just because of the people looking for yield, and they're willing to pay more for these notes, and resulting in a lower yield. So it used to be kind of like 12 to 15% was kind of like the sweet spot for buying either low valued performing note or a reperforming note. But now I'm finding that, people are willing to pay like 9, 10%, 11 kind of is like the range. So it's so it's a good time to unnote. However, the unfortunate part is it's hard to, if you're looking for yield and you just want to be a note investor and more passively, it's hard to find good paying notes now. So so it's kind of a catch-22. And then on the flip side too is non-performing pricing's gone up as well, because the foreclosures moratoriums being out in the last since the pandemic began, and people are not able to foreclose as they once were. There's just not the inventory out there. So it's so it's, I don't know, things are going to change probably come September when the foreclosure moratorium ends, hopefully, and there might be a bit more inventory coming back on the street. The downside of that, though, is if there's a flood of foreclosures coming on, then that could potentially put a dent in the appreciation that we've enjoyed the last year. And interest rates are only going to go up from here because inflation is going up. So when, as you know, interest rates going up, less people apply for mortgages, less people buy homes, so it's going to be an interesting time for the next year, 18 months to see where this all plays out. So
I mean, what's your opinion then of, like, because all of this is going down because of COVID? I think that COVID was helped the note investing space, or did it hurt it? Or I mean, is it still too early to say since we're kind of still in the middle of it?
Well, like I said, for people like that owned performing notes and like, the semi-performing ones, I think it's really helped in that respect. I don't know, it might have just been me, but a lot of people I talk to is like, like a lot of my notes have caught up now. So I think it's, pretty synonymous across the board. So it's kind of helped in that respect. But with all these moratoriums put in place, I think the government has just been kicking the can down the road for a lot of these borrowers that aren't able, like, they went on a forbearance plan, but there's still like 2 million in the forbearance plans right now, which is the same level as it was back in 2008. So it's like, and the foreclosure rate is like 1/10 what it was back then. So something, when all these forbearance plans end and they lift the eviction moratoriums, it's going to be an interesting time. Or not the eviction moratoriums, the foreclosure moratoriums, when they lift those, should be interesting to see what happens. So I'm expecting should be a bit more inventory come out the next 6 months. Although we've been saying that for like a year now, where there's gonna be a lot more inventory because there's all these delinquent loans out there. But
Yeah. Since you first started in notes till now, do you think has the industry changed pretty drastically, or is it pretty much similar from when you first started?
Well, pricing's definitely gone up. Like it's gone up significantly. Like, gone are the days where you can pick up something at 40 cents on the dollar. It's well, the reason for that too is, now that the collateral value or the properties have gone up in value, then that makes that even that non-performing more valuable, because now that it's got equity, usually they're trade at like 60, 70 cents on the dollar. Some people want over 100% on the dollar, because there's all these accrued interest charges and escrow for taxes and corporate charges for legal fees. So, some sellers want like astronomical prices, like 110% of the unpaid balance, which, not in a million years I'd want to do that. There is one seller that is actually starting to guarantee the full payoff, which had them put them into their purchase and sale agreement, which I haven't had to. I've only had a couple from them since, but I haven't had to challenge that yet. I'm just hoping that they're going to honor their word that if you go to foreclose and you can't use that entire payoff amount, that you can go back. I can go back to the seller and say, listen, you guaranteed this. I need a reduction in price, sort of thing. But yeah, gone are the days, like I said, the buying them at 40 cents, and gone are the days where you can kind of cherry pick. I'm finding that you need to start buying them in bulk in order to get better deals. So it is getting tougher and tougher to buy. And unless if you're starting out nowadays, I think it'd be a really tough time starting out as a note investor because of that. You can still pick them up here and there, but they're going to be somebody else's garbage, right? So, but one man's treasures and another man's trash, or whatever the saying goes.
But to that point, though, for somebody that's new and they want to get in the note investing space, like, what kind of advice would you recommend?
Kind of advice? Well, I would definitely recommend. So I was talking about the 10x book earlier, where he says, just set your mind to it and go for it. Yeah. I don't 100% agree with that. Like, you need to get a little bit of education ahead of time. Yeah. So, if a note investor is really interested in it, just like anything, you need to educate yourself, right? Right. But I would not spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a guru or a mentorship program. Like I know some of them out there are astronomically priced, like 25 to 75 grand. You don't need that. Take that money and buy a note. And the best way to learn this business is to buy a note. And if you lose all your money on that, oh well, that's a lesson that you're not going to make that mistake again, right? Right. You don't learn those things in those guru programs. They kind of like just touch on the high level stuff, and they don't get in the nitty and gritty. So you don't understand things until you actually jump in and do it. So I would recommend, like I said, get 3 to 6 months. Maybe sign up for a couple of the virtual programs, like the online ones. That are $1,000 or a couple grand. I definitely think that's a good investment, just to get familiar with yourself, just so that you kind of know what you're doing when you jump in and you buy a note. Like, okay, you buy a note, the first thing you do is board it with a servicer, make sure you got insurance on it, find out where the collateral is going. Those kind of things. Like, it's a little bit overwhelming at first, but if most of those programs will kind of teach you that stuff, the basics. So you needed to kind of know that ahead of time. But after that, no one else teaches about asset management. Like, there's hardly anybody out there is like, okay, what do you do now that you got the note? Okay, what do you do with the servicer? How do you instruct the servicer? When do you start the foreclosure process? When should you send out a demand letter? No one really gets into that. But that's stuff that you just kind of learn as you go. So anyway, so hopefully that answers your question. It's just, yeah.
You did. As it relates to just note business, like, what's your long-term goal with all the notes that you're doing? Is it all mainly for cash flow? Is it for something else, or where are you going with this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So my strategy's changed. I'm almost back to where I was when I first started in the note business. Now, I wouldn't say I'm back into it, but I'm kind of like adding to my. So when I first started, I was all about my mentality from buying foreclosures was, okay, I'm just going to foreclose on this. So I just wanted to buy foreclosures so I could, take the property back and fix it up, or just sell it as is and make my 20 or 30%. Yeah. I learned very quickly that, that doesn't always happen. There's this thing called bankruptcy. So the day before foreclosure, and I should have known this, because I used to go to bid on stuff, or I'd spend like a week investing in a few properties, and half of them would declare bankruptcy and you wouldn't be able to bid on it, foreclosure. Well, that happens to you when you own the note, and when they file bankruptcy, you can't do anything with it whatsoever for, depending on whether it's a chapter 7 or chapter 13. I won't get into the details on it, but that's put on hold for minimum 4 to 6 months. So my very second, I think, note purchase was it was just like that, where they filed foreclosure. And then I had, like I said, I bought like 10 or 12. And I think the 4th or 5th one I bought, same thing happened within like the same month. Within a month or two. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like, I thought I was going to get these 2 foreclosures, the screaming good deal, and turn around and flip them, or, fix them up and sell them. And then it was like, oh my gosh, that I like, my money is tied up and I can't do anything with this for 4 to 6 months down the road at least. And if they go into chapter 13, then it's tied up for 5 years. And it's like, holy cow. So my mentality back then was, I just wanted to like start flipping them and turning the capital. But then I discovered that, man, when you buy these and you get them paying again, they reinstate and they're consistently paying after that. It's like, okay, so I've got cash flow coming in the door. If I keep buying those and getting them to, getting them back on track, you keep buying them. I remember seeing this seminar way back, like 3-4 years ago. I can't remember the guy's, Randy Roddenhouse, I think his name is, and his company or his tagline is Income Stacker. And I remember watching this, I'm like, man, that makes sense. Like, you just keep buying them and, like, your cash flow continue. It's just like buying a rental property, right? The more rental properties you have, the more cash flow. It's the very same concept. So then I kind of got on to, okay, let's start doing that. Because in the mix there as well, I took back a couple foreclosures that were total disasters, where, not that I lost money on them, but I was like, I didn't make nearly as much as I thought. So I'm like, okay, going this road is, the income stacker approach is, a much more lucrative, especially if you're, it's like one of your main sources of income. But since the pandemic started, it's hard to find, though. Like I said, the pricing was going up on these like spotty pairs. I'm kind of getting back into buying the late stage foreclosures again, where, and I'll do my research ahead of time that it's almost guaranteed that they're probably not going to file bankruptcy, or they can't file bankruptcy. The property's vacant, so there's usually a good chance, if the property's vacant, that they're going to walk away from it. So so I've been kind of not going back to that strategy, but adding that strategy again. So I kind of like having the mix of having foreclosures on the go that I know I'm taking back, and the ones that I can get them to start paying again, and so kind of a mixture of both. So that's kind of like strategy at this point in time going forward, is to have a mixture of both. And I think that's kind of what I'm going to keep doing for the near future at least. But no, definitely adding that income stack is where I'm at. Like, in actuality, I've some of my partners that I've had some notes with, that we've got them reperforming, they're like, oh, let's redeploy this capital again. Can we sell it? And so I've actually been buying, like, my company's money, whatever, buying them out, and then they'll give me the money back to buy something else, but I've been buying them, because I'm like, well, these are great reperforming notes again. I don't want to sell them. I mean, we can get a screaming good deal for them, but I'm going to lose that cash flow, even though I'm only taking a portion of it. Why not just buy it? And so that's kind of what I've been doing the last little while. So
yeah, I mean, you've done so many notes and negotiated and so many of them. And I want to ask you, like, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned, even just in the last year or two of doing them?
Biggest lesson learned? Oh man, there's so many, like so many. I tell everybody, especially that they're first starting out, is the 2 biggest dangers in this business are the property itself, like the condition of the property, and the title on the note or the mortgage itself. So I could go in, oh man, I could tell you so many disaster stories, but I could also tell you a lot of like home run stories too, like grand slams, like, it's so there's everything in between. So I kind of use the analogy is, note investing is kind of like the game of golf. There's actually like baseball and golf. So in baseball, you get a base hit, that's great. You get a second base hit, that's better. A third base hit, that's fantastic. But if you get a home run, that's like, that's the best scenario. But if you get a grand slam, like that's like off the charts. So no business is like that. Each deal's kind of like that. And then the analogy I use with golf is, in golf, you go out, you have a fantastic drive. It's like, oh man, right down the middle, 280 yards out. And then your second shot goes into the woods. You're like, oh man, I want to quit this game. And then, then you plop it onto the green, like, okay, I'm back in the game. And then you sink or you miss like a 10-foot putt. And you're like, okay. And then you miss a 3-foot putt. And you're like, oh, this game really irks me. So it's kind of like a roller coaster. You're up and down and up and down. So I use that analogy for note investing, but getting back to the lessons learned is, you really have to set as many eyes as you can on that property. However, like, there's lots of tools out there nowadays, especially with everything virtual.
Yeah.
Send out at least one inspection. You need to have an inspector out there and try to talk them into walking the property, like going around the back. That's trespassing. You're not supposed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they find that it's occupied, you can't do that. But if it looks like it's vacant, get them to walk around the property. Like I said, you're not really supposed to do that, but you never know what's in the back. Like, I took a property back a few months ago. There was a hole in the back wall, and the ceiling was like caving. The roof was caving in. You couldn't see it from the street. House is a total disaster. It needs to be torn down. So I thought it was worth. I got a BPO. It was worth 85, 90. I discounted at the time to like 60. And it's for sale right now for 29,000, and still not, like, we had some offers, but like less than that. So that's not the first time this happened. It's probably not gonna be the last, but on that one in particular, it looked like it was vacant. So I probably should have sent them out again, say, hey, you can actually secure a property. You really shouldn't before you own the note, but you can actually send someone out to, like, at least walk, like I said, walk around it, see if it's secured or not. So that's one of the big lessons, and I'll throw out 2 lessons. The other one is, and this just comes from experience. No guru is going to teach you this, but get to know how to read a title report and read the mortgage. This is something I still don't really do, and I really need to start doing more of it. But I've got some real, I'll call them challenges right now that I think I can overcome. But there's major title issues on some of these things I'm dealing with right now that I probably wouldn't have likely picked it up anyway. But now I know it's like, okay, like this one mortgage encumbered 4 parcels of land, and only one's got the house on it. These other ones were just vacant parcels of land that were lost in a tax sale. So the attorney comes back and says, well, we can't foreclose because those were lost in a tax sale. Well, what do you mean they can't be? Like, the house is still there. Why can't we foreclose on that property or that parcel? And they said, well, we can, but anyway, it's a long convoluted story, but like that's another big lesson I said, is just like understanding title. And I thought I knew a lot of this coming into this business from buying foreclosures, but I got curveballs thrown at me all the time. So always educating yourself, or just taking your lessons learned and looking out for it the next time. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Is the property itself and the title. Those are the 2 main.
So it sounds like there's still surprises that to be had, and lessons to be learned in this business. I mean, regardless, you're always.
Oh yeah. Like almost every day, I'm getting a curveball thrown at me. Like, where did that come from? It's like, wow. It's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. Like, there's still things out there. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's like, wow, where did that come from? Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I kind of love about this business, is that there's so many moving parts to it, and
it's on your toes.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes. It's never a dull moment. But then there's sleepless nights too, right? That come with it. It's like, you're up half the night worrying about the 5 deals that have gone off the rails, and how are you going to deal with those? So like, when I get after this call, I there's like 2 or 3 fires I got to put out that I've just been kind of dreading since yesterday, that I just was made aware of. I'm like, oh.
What you just said is how I feel about the real estate sales business, being a realtor too. So it's the same thing. I can totally relate.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the middle of buying a property too, and I'm having some issues with that too, and selling one, and so like on the flip side, I've got a couple of REOs that rehabbed, and now people can't get financing again because they've tightened the rope so, like, I've had one fall out of escrow 3 bloody times, and I've had this one. It was one of those ones I bought years ago, and it was a foreclosure disaster. Finally get it back, and I'm like, okay, I could probably make a little bit of money in this still, but I'm like, let's just rehab it. It sold within, is how the market is right now. Within like the first day, 5 offers. Go back out, get highest and best.
Yeah.
First one falls through. The appraisal didn't come in. So there's an appraisal gap. They didn't want to fill the remainder of their down payment. Fine, put it up for sale again. And each time I was raising the price, and I'm still getting prices over asking. Like, it's crazy, this market, right? So I'm like, I'm not taking the highest price this time. I'm taking what my list price was, because that's why the appraisal fell short the first time. So I'll get the appraisal in. It matches, and then the guy couldn't. He couldn't get the financing fell through. I'm like, what? And he sold a house that had a mortgage on it. I'm like, what is going on with that? And then, oh man, so yeah.
Wow.
so many moving parts in this business, man.
Never a dull moment. So just wrapping up here, actually. So, like, how can somebody learn about you and your company?
They can go to my website. It's www.equigrowth.com, which is EquiGrowth.com. Or I'm on a bunch of Facebook groups. I'm usually pretty active in those. Like, there's like the Chris Savini's Good Deeds Note Investing podcast, or whatever it is. There's a few others out there, like East Coast Distressed Note Investing. There's Note Investing Mortgages Simplified. So I'm usually on all those. Or I find messengers, like, Facebook Messenger is the easiest way to get a hold of people nowadays. It's kind of scary how you can reach out to anybody on earth now that you don't know. Say, hey.
I mean, what's your preferred, like, when somebody has questions from the audience, how can they reach you for questions?
That's probably the easiest way. Just go, just find me on Facebook Messenger. So yeah, that's usually the easiest. So, as opposed to shooting out my email, I can get my email too. It's Chad, CHAD @equigrowth.com. So,
well, these are all the questions I had for this show. And if any of you listeners have any questions for Chad, feel free to reach out to him directly. So, Chad, thanks for coming on this episode. And appreciate your time and just giving all the value to my listeners. And to my listeners, thanks for checking out this week's show of the School of Cash Flow. And I'll see you guys next week. So until then, live your life abundantly.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the School of Cash Flow. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into all the tips and tricks you can use to help you on your passive investing journey. In the meantime, you may visit www.cashflowschoolpodcast.com for more great episodes. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. That's all for this episode, folks. See you next time.